Is it filmed?
You should see a countdown.
It started.
Hi, I'm Sydney. Hi, I'm Celia. Hi, Rebecca. And welcome to Great Sand Dunes National Park!
Man, these sand dunes are gorgeous. I wish I knew more about them. Maybe some knowledgeable young ladies can help me out.
Well, sir, actually, in the 1920s, this place was used as a gold mining site, as well as we exported sand for cement making purposes.
Sydney, you're so right. Yeah, and then in 1932, Herbert Hoover passed a bill making this a national monument after support from local citizens and the women's chapter of the PEO of the San Luis Valley.
Wow. Then in 2000, Congress passed the Great Sand Dunes National Park Preserve Act, which moved it from a national monument to a national park at 4 times larger of an area. That was an extra 42,000 acres of forest wilderness area. So then, now it's renamed the Great Sand Dunes National Preserve.
Great Sand Dunes National Park is under Category 2 for the IUCN Protected Area categories. This means that it is managed for ecosystem protection and for recreation.
So a long time ago, mountains and volcanoes emerged, called the San Juan Valley Mountains. Glaciers and water from these mountains flowed downwards to create a lake that used to exist. Scientists call it Lake Alamosa. When this water from the lake became so heavy and the pressure so high, it submerged through the volcanic sediment that was there, leaving just the sediment that is now the Great Sand Dunes. The sand dunes don't shrink and they don't grow, they just recycle themselves through wind alone. Wind brings sediment from west to east before it settles before the mountain range, and then surrounding watersheds bring it back west before the water evaporates, leaving just the sand, to then again swipe east before settling in the sand dunes.
A previous threat to Great Sand Dunes National Park was oil companies, which wanted to explore the land for oil, but that's no longer a problem. Another previous threat to the land was Baca Ranch, which had much of the land that is currently Great Sand Dunes National Park, but that was resolved in 2000 when Congress passed an act asking for acquisition of Baca Ranch and making Great Sand Dunes National Park 4 times its original size.
When we went to visit the Great Sand Dunes, we talked with Ranger James. He informed us that there was a big concern over the water levels in the park, and that there was research being done to try and figure out what was going on. On the phone, I talked to geologist Andrew Valdez, who mentioned how the park was currently using water gauges, balloons, and monitoring wells to keep an eye on the water level. They wanted to keep an eye on this because the water level is highly variable in the park. Even though the threat to the water is not currently a huge issue, there's potential for it to be a bigger problem in the future. Geologist Andrew also mentioned about the changes to the water rights in the park. So in 2000, when they expanded the boundary to the national park, the water rights belonged to the Park Service now, and the water rights are protecting the stream and the groundwater. No other park in the U.S. has rights to the groundwater, but the Sand Dunes does.
Water is literally essential from keeping the Great Sand Dunes from blowing away. Because of the Great Sand Dunes cyclatory process, water is essential in bringing the sand back to where it belongs. Also, it brings tourism. Madonna Creek is one of the biggest tourist attractions of the Great Sand Dunes. It also prevents invasive species from coming into the sand dunes, also wildfires. It overall is just essential to the existence of the sand dunes. One of the biggest threats of the sand dunes is indirect. Ironically, it is the threat of climate change, primarily its impact on the existence of water. Because climate change has already impacted the climate of most other national parks in Colorado, sand dunes has been left unscathed, creating like a haven for species who need the space to exist and not go extinct, including what we call the red cutthroat trout is being implemented into the watershed around the Great Sand Dunes. But because the threat of climate change still exists, and if the global carbon levels do not decrease, the climate will increase by 9 degrees by 2100. The safe haven of the sand dunes will be gone, and so will all of its biodiversity that it has.
The threats planning system, which best matches Great Sand Dunes National Park, is monitoring and evaluation procedures. Through water level monitoring, we are protecting the park by paying attention to its most vital natural resource.
The 3 key management principles for battling the threat of water loss are the effective environmental planning processes are necessary to combat threats to PAs. This is being done through water research. The second one is threats to PAs are inevitable. This is being done through increases in climate change and will ultimately affect water levels. The third is dealing with threats may require long-term activity. There is a potential of this being a long-term problem and requires more and more research.